Hello everyone, welcome to the CIMA discussion of the February 2018 management case study. My name is Hashan Madushanka and I am the lead tutor for CIMA. Now if you are tuned in with this video, I'm sure you must have plans of facing the management case study exam in February 2018. So your entrance into the exam might have been in one of two ways. Either you would have come through the normal route of CIMA, cleared the operational level, operational case study, management OTQs, and moving on with the management case study. Some of you might have entered this through the gateway route. Right, so let me begin by talking a little about the study material and the practice that is required before you face this exam. Now, for those of you who have come through the normal route, you all would have possibly attended lectures on the 3 OTQ subjects for P2, E2 and F2, or else you might have self-studied. But for those of you who entered this exam through the gateway route, let me clearly remind you that although you would have completed your MBA or maybe an MSc, please do not underestimate the difficulty level of this exam. And there are certain areas within these 3 subjects that you may have not come across in your previous studies. So please don't be under the impression that you can simply go into the exam and face it and just clear it. And if you think I'm wrong, well, you can take a look at the pass rates of the management level case study for normal candidates and the gateway route. So you will notice that gateway route is much lower, and from my experience that is mainly because there's a tendency to take this too lightly, or you tend to be a little too overconfident. So as a favor for you, let me initially remind you guys that it is important for you to first of all know what you can be tested upon. So you need to have a good idea about the syllabus contents throughout P2, E2 and F2. And once you get to know the syllabus, you need to mark out the areas that you need further studying on. Right? So for example, most of the E2 areas you should be able to manage, like relationship management, strategy and so on. But areas mainly from F2, such as consolidation, then the accounting standards, IFRS and IAS, those may be areas that you need to spend your time upon. So get your hands on the CIMA curriculum and have an idea about that before you start. And we at CIMA, we offer you a complete solution for this. We will provide you all the study material, the analysis material of the pre-scene, and of course 5 mock exams with solutions and feedback, and additionally some hours in Skype where you can directly interact with the tutor and clear all your doubts. So having that said, let's get on with the discussion of the pre-scene. So this is a company named Nortan, and when you see the image, it looks like something to do with extraction, right? Something like an oil rig possibly. So we have the contents given, around 17 pages, which is low, I would say, because generally the pre-scene would go on for at least 20 pages. So this time the pre-scene amounts to 20 pages as well. So that's towards the lower side of the norm. Right, let's get started. The introduction. Right, so let's see the type of company that we are dealing with. Nortan is a major quoted oil company that operates globally. Alright, so we have some key words that we need to discuss. Major, quoted, then as I correctly guessed, it was something to do with an oil rig, right? So it's an oil company that operates globally. So these couple of words that we are looking at, let me break it down. So when you say major, Well, it sounds like it's a big player in the market. Quoted, of course, it's a listed public limited company, and it's into oil, and it operates in more than one country, so more of a multinational company. Right, so let's discuss the implications of these. Now, this being a major company would mean it would have, other competitors that we have to fight with, right? And also we can assume that we have a high bargaining power, which we can possibly use on our suppliers in an ethical manner, of course, right? And we would also have support from possibly governments and other authorities, depending on the processes that we conduct. Then looking at the second term, quoted. So us being a public limited company, well, it gives us access to a wider amount of finance because we are able to issue shares to the general public. And it also brings in corporate governance, right? So in terms of our director board, there are certain regulations that we may have to follow. So we might be looking at the application of the UK combined code for this company, where for instance chairman and the CEO roles should be separated, and the board should have a good mix of executive and non-executive directors, right? So implications like that. And also certain accounting standards that are applicable only for public limited companies, like operating segments, for example. So these are things that you need to keep in mind. Then looking at the industry, we are looking at an oil company. So oil extraction and the sales of products relating to oil, well, it can have a moderate margin, and it mainly depends on the volume, right? So oil companies generally sell in they produce and they extract in very large volumes. So management of the processes, right, management of operations should be properly handled. Then it operating globally, well, this would have certain implications in terms of certain subject areas. So we know that E2 has a dedicated area for the global business environment. So we are looking at, say, national cultures, right? So the different countries that we are dealing with, the national culture would be different, and we need to arrange our processes in such a way that there is no disruption from that, right? And also cost efficiencies in different countries, right? National competitive advantage, that is linked to Porter's diamond theory, right? And also when it comes to financial reporting, we can look at the financial reporting implications when we operate globally. So we might possibly have foreign subsidiaries and a lot of foreign transactions, right? So these are things that need to be reported or accounted for in line with standards, right? Most of its accounting information is processed at Norton's Finance Operations Shared Service Center, right? So this being a large global company, it seems to be operating a shared service center, which is of course for finance operations, finance related operations. So this is possibly where the finance functions of all the different countries that we operate in, or the different companies and the divisions that we have, is handled from one central location, right? So where all the documentation is passed on to this service center, and they record all the transactions and generate relevant financial reports, right? So there are many implications or many factors to consider before implementing this, right? And you would notice that a large section of your pre-scene will be covering about the FOSSC, right? So we have in-depth knowledge about how this works, and what are the future impacts of this, and the history about this, and so on. So we'll be looking at that later on. Now let's look at what you have to do, or your role in the company. So as always, you're a senior financial manager. Let me correct myself. Well, generally the position is financial manager or finance manager, but now in this pre-scene you are a senior financial manager and you are based in Norton's head office in Centaria, where the FOSSC was established in 2002. Right, so let's first talk about the role of a senior financial manager. Now, as a senior financial manager, don't be under the impression that your job role is only to do with numbers and cost reports. You have a much wider job role than that, right? With the changing trends in the world, we know that people entering into the finance field cannot only be good with, processing numbers, because now you have sophisticated information systems that can easily generate all the output reports. So as a number-based person or a person involving with numbers, your job role is much wider than simply processing the numbers, right? So now it's more in line with interpreting the numbers and how it adds value to the company, right? And also recommending strategies to improve our performance. Okay, and also advising on financial reporting, right? So I was talking about P2 and F2 mainly, but don't forget that you also have a role with regards to E2, where you have to manage relationships with the stakeholders, with the relevant stakeholders, right? So for example, shareholders may be concerned about a particular decision we are about to take, right? So you have to convince your shareholders that this is the right choice. So simply throwing some numbers at them would not be good enough. You also have to look at the non-financial implications of the decision. So this all requires your communication skills in the form of emails at your exam. And also you would have to be involved to a certain extent with the future strategy of the business, right? Handling projects, and of course things relevant to HR issues, and how to deal with cultural differences and so on, right? So please keep in mind that you can be tested from any area in any of the three subjects, E2, P2 and F2. Now true enough that P2 is of course the main trigger at your exam, as your examiner says, but please give enough attention to F2 and E2 as well, right? Because to pass this exam, it's not simply about scoring 80 out of 150. You also need to have moderate marks rather in the 4 skills: technical, people, business and leadership, right? So your exam questions will be giving marks from a range of these 4 skills, and also your exam areas will be coming from a range of the 3 subjects, which means you cannot take a risk with regards to with regards to picking and choosing certain areas and ignoring the rest. You cannot afford to do that, right? So at the initial outset itself, let me warn you, please be thorough with all the areas in your syllabus, right? Then moving back to discussion of the pre-scene. So your job role is such that your main focus should be on the medium term, right? So those of you that have completed your operational case study exam, you know that your role was a finance officer and your main focus was on the short term, where you looked at things like limiting factors, variances, then looking at capacity planning, accounting for certain small scale transactions, right, events after the reporting period and so on. But now your focus should be more long term, and a very important area would be investment appraisal, right, which is a key part of P2. Then you also have the role of managing risks within the company, right, risk management, and you have to advise on advanced accounting treatments, such as say foreign subsidiaries, for example, right, and piecemeal acquisitions, right? So that is all about your job role, and you are based in Norton's head office, and this is in Centaria. Now bear in mind that Centaria is an imaginary country, right? So don't waste time researching on what real world country does this resemble with, right? Please don't waste time doing that. because your examiner has clearly specified that this is not a real world country with a change in the name, right? This is a purely hypothetical or a fictitious country. Now, this is the country in which you have the FOSSC, and the service center FOSSC was established in 2002. So that is 16 years ago, right? So that's a long time, and by now all the processes should be properly streamlined, and we would have learned a lot about the mistakes that would have happened along the way and taken action to prevent them happening, right? So continuous learning is important. The currency in Centaria is the C dollar. So once again, don't think of this as the US dollar or the Australian dollar or so on, because it's a fictitious currency, right? But keep in mind that you might be tested on certain accounting treatments for exchange rate related transactions. Your primary responsibilities are associated with management accounting. So management accounting is definitely the main trigger, which is of course P2, subject P2, advanced management accounting. This means that you must often liaise with colleagues in many of the countries where Nortan operates, as well as colleagues in the FOSSC in Centaria. Right. So as I mentioned earlier, guys, you should not only focus on number-based areas, because you're expected to liaise with people from different functions. So you need to have a knowledge on how to tackle each and every obstacle that comes your way, and help out others whenever it's needed. Right. So that's the introduction of the company. There were many points that we could discuss there. Now let's move on to the company background. The Nortan Group was established in Europe in the early part of the 20th century. Right, so this is operating in Europe, and it is clear that this is not in the Eurozone because the currency is not the euro, but instead it's the C dollar. And it has more than, almost 100 years of experience, or even more than that. So when you say early part of the 20th century, it might be 1910, 1920, right? But what we do know is it has a very long history. So within this time period, the company might have, faced many changes in its operations, in its strategy, and especially with the development of technology, right? So 1910, 1920, they would have come across, Second World War time, and the emergence of new sorts of communications like emails and so on. So this would have taken the company through many changes, but nevertheless, it mentioned that this is still a major company that operates worldwide. So far seems like they have done a good job, and it is your responsibility as the financial manager to ensure that performance is up to or exceeding the standard always. So that is where your job role becomes crucial to the company. It grew rapidly, eventually becoming a major force in the exploration and exploitation of the oil reserves in the North Sea. Right, so two industrial terms that are seen here, exploration and exploitation. So they almost sound similar, but the difference is exploration is where you explore for potential deposits that we can extract, and exploitation is more in line with, once the exploration finds out some area, exploitation involves setting up the machines and so on to properly initiate the extraction of the raw material out of the deposits, right? So now don't worry too much about the technical terms of the industry, right? You will not be tested on that. So we are extracting, or seems like we are looking at exploring the oil reserves in the North Sea. Now, when it comes to oil exploration, it is very important that we obtain permission for this in a legal way with all the relevant documentation, because the slightest mismatch in documents or the slightest weakness in our procedures can cause a lot of trouble for us legally and also reputationally. So we should have a proper compliance department ensuring this, right? So before we explore a certain area, we need to take regulatory permission from it, and also before we start exploiting, again we need to pay the relevant fees for the license for the relevant country. And another feature that we see in most oil extraction companies is that they have significant provisions, right? And this is important for you because IAS 37 is in your F2 syllabus, and situations or scenarios like this, you have a question or two in your F2 study text, right, directly relevant to oil extraction. Now, a particular term that you would have come across would be decommissioning cost. So generally, when we set up an oil rig to extract oil, after a particular time period, after the license ends or after we have extracted all the available resources, we might have to exit that area and bring back the area or rectify the damages that is done to the sea, right, and also to other relevant aspects. So this is a possible or probable future liability, right, and it might be stipulated in the contract that you sign with the government of that particular country. So let's for example say that we are looking at a 10-year license, and at the end of 10 years we would have to rectify any damages done. So now itself we can create a provision because it meets the three conditions: present obligation because of a past event, reliable estimate available, and probable outflow of economic benefits. So we can create a provision as a non-current liability, right? So that is something you need to properly revise upon. It's a very probable area for this exam, provided the industry. It expanded into other regions through a combination of acquisition and organic growth, right? So the expansion strategy is clear, right? There are many companies that may be overly risk averse and they may not be willing to acquire other companies, but instead it might wish to grow on its own. But we see that Nortan seems to follow a strategy of organic growth as well as acquisition, right? So the word acquisition reminded me again of the relevance of consolidated financial statements, right? So when you acquire a company, it can be either more than 50% of the shares, which makes it a subsidiary. It can be 20 to 50% and significant influence, which makes it an associate, or even less than 20%, which would make it an investment. So depending on the shareholding and these features, it is important to remember that the accounting treatment can be different, right, for investment in associates, subsidiaries, and just a regular investment, which is covered from IAS 32 and 39. So that is something you need to go through. And also, when acquiring a company, you would have to negotiate a purchase price, right? So recording the purchase price in the accounting system is to do with F2, but the negotiation part of the purchase price and other aspects, that is linking into E2, because we are looking at communication strategies, which is a major part of relationship management, right? So not only do you have to advise on how to deal with the numbers, but also you might have to advise on how to carry out the negotiation process, right, and how to manage the relationship, right, and resistance to change and so on. So that is why this exam style is highly appreciated, because it's an integrated case study, very much relevant for your working environment, right? So moving on to the next para. Nortan Group is a vertically integrated business. Now, vertical integration, horizontal integration, these are terms that you would have studied for economics at a basic level. So horizontal integration involves acquiring businesses within the same line, that is, companies that are into oil exploration and exploitation, or maybe refining rather. Now, vertical integration here refers to the different stages of this process. So the first stage would be, of course, exploring, exploiting and refining oil out of the deposits. Then second step would be refining the oil and processing or segregating them into different products, right? The crude oil to petrol, diesel, kerosene, jet oil and so on. And the last stage would be, of course, selling these to the customer by means of petrol filling stations. So vertical integration involves acquiring businesses relevant to all those stages: extraction, refining and selling. And as it clearly says, it extracts, refines and sells oil, natural gas and petrochemicals, right? So three products that we are mainly dealing with: oil, natural gas used for cooking and heating purposes, petrochemicals like propylene, ethylene, methane and so on. Okay, so those are generally sold to commercial customers for the production of other particular products like polypropylene and so on. So you don't need to do extensive research on this, but it's good to know about the different challenges faced by such companies, right? And what are the major risks surrounding them? How does the business model properly work? So for that purpose, we have created a document called the industry analysis, right? 35 to 40 pages in total, that gives you a quick knowledge boost on how the industry is formulated. So you can get your hands on that by visiting our website. It operates in 85 countries, produces 2.8 million barrels of oil equivalent each day, and has 41,000 petrol stations worldwide. Right, so that is a lot of work for the company. So it's a pretty large company, right? 85 countries, that's a significant amount. So we were talking about foreign subsidiaries, and this is very important for the accounting treatment, because since we have so many different subsidiaries, we have to prepare consolidated statements, and dealing with foreign subsidiaries is covered as a separate chapter for F2, right? Accounting for foreign exchange differences in net assets, goodwill, right? Things about closing rate, average rate and so on. All of that needs to be revised. So it produces 2.8 million barrels of oil equivalent each day. So the process that is carried out to conduct this, it needs to be in line with quality standards, right, which is an important area of P2. And also we could be looking at cost reduction techniques such as value analysis, life cycle costing, target costing and so on. And of course it has 41,000 petrol stations worldwide. So 41,000 is a very large amount, right? So it is very important that they operate investment centers, or it has a divisional structure instead of a functional structure, right? Because having a functional structure makes no sense, because they are operating in so many countries and decision making would be extremely slow, and it would also have a lot of burden to the functional heads, right? So going ahead with a divisional structure makes a lot of sense. The Nortan Group's operations include exploring for oil in various countries, extracting and refining of crude oil, manufacturing and selling petrochemicals, and the operation of petrol stations that retail fuel along with confectionery and newspapers directly to consumers. Right, so that sentence sums up the different activities of the company, right? Exploring for oil, so this is more in line with a research activity, right? So we could look at the application of IAS 38 research and development. So exploring involves researching whether there are oil deposits in different parts. Extracting, so once you find out a potential area for the availability of oil reserves, you could be carrying out the exploitation, where you set up the different equipment needed to extract the oil, and the extraction has to be done very carefully. So if you remember, there was a major incident in 2010, the explosion of the oil rig belonging to British Petroleum, and there was a movie that was based on that as well, Deepwater Horizon. So that is one movie that I would invite you all to watch, because it will give you some idea about the risks that are surrounding this industry, right? How things should be formulated. Okay, and we know that British Petroleum suffered a lot with all the legal issues and compensations, right, which amounted to billions. But even more than that, the damage that was done to the environment was substantial. Certain people lost their lives and faced and got injured and so on. So it was a real crisis, right, and a very sad situation. So the extraction and the extraction operations mainly should follow very high safety standards. Now that gets me linking this into E2. E2 has an area relevant to HR, which is looking at disciplinary and safety procedures, grievance procedures, and so on. So it's very important that our employees adhere with all the safety standards and the precautions that we have set out to them. And violation of these or not adhering with these should be followed up with disciplinary action, because conducting these procedures are for their own good, right? And it is important that they follow that, so that we don't have to face reputational risks and external failure costs in future. The refining of crude oil, well, this gets me thinking about something you learned in your previous level, which is of course joint product costing, right? So it's not within the scope of the P2 syllabus, right? So we know that crude oil can give us many joint products and byproducts. Okay, so exactly costing for them we have come across. Manufacturing and selling petrochemicals and the operation of petrol stations. Now in these petrol stations we see that they are selling confectionery and newspapers. So I'm guessing that these products are being purchased externally, right? Because it's a little out of the line of business that we are looking at, right? If we are manufacturing confectionery and newspapers, well, I'm not denying the possibility of us doing this, but well, you could be looking at the suitability, acceptability, feasibility criteria rather, and this may not exactly fit into our line of business unless we are fine with diversifying, right? So having this would be beneficial, because as a customer you would know that when you move into a petrol station, you find small mini marts and so on, selling items. So this is of course a good move, and it would give them a decent amount of profit, given that they have 41,000 petrol stations worldwide. The Nortan Group comprises the parent company along with more than 200 wholly owned subsidiaries. Right, so as a finance manager, that's a lot of work for you. It's not that you have to do the accounting treatment for all of this, but you need to maintain a level of responsibility for carrying out the correct accounting treatment, right? So your advice will be very much necessary for the people that are reporting to you, right? So at certain times there might be very complex transactions that they are not very aware about in terms of the accounting treatment. So here you should take the initiative and advise them on what exactly they need to do, right? So obviously you don't have to conduct any calculations and work out anything, but it's your advice in words that are required, right? Although you need to interpret any given set of numbers in an attachment. Each subsidiary falls within one of four categories: exploration, extraction, refining, and petrol stations. Right, so these are the four main activities that we are conducting, and our subsidiaries are broken into these categories, which would make it easier for us to understand the business model. Each of these categories is under the control of a senior management team. Now, your job role might be for the overall company, or you might even be involved in one management team if you're not so sure. And the four senior management teams report to Norton's head office. So as I mentioned earlier, we seem to be having a divisional structure where we have broken our subsidiaries into the services or the business activities that are being carried out. Now, it is important to understand how we are going to handle the performance management of these different subsidiaries, because some of them might be cost centers, right? So for example, if you look at exploration, that would possibly be a cost center, right? Then you might have profit centers and of course investment centers. So petrol stations can either be profit centers or investment centers. So if the petrol station manager has authority to invest in non-current assets without approval of the head office, that would make it an investment center. But having to obtain approval will make it a profit center, because it has operational cost and also it generates revenue, unlike exploration, extraction, and refining. So depending on the center or depending on the amount of responsibility, we need to set the key performance indicators accordingly so that it's within their control. So that is a very important area of P2, financial and non-financial performance indicators. Then another aspect that needs to be considered would be the transfer pricing policy, right? So refining would involve, refining all the material and the crude oil into the different byproducts, or the joint products rather. So petrol will be transferred from the refining into the petrol stations, and mind you, the petrol stations are operating worldwide, right? And which means the refining company can be in one country but the petrol station in another. So when the transport takes place internationally, this needs to be recorded in the company's books by means of a transfer price, and that would have a significant impact on the performance evaluation and also the tax implications, right? Global tax implications. So transfer prices should be ideally set at arm's length prices after consultation with the relevant tax authorities, so that we don't face issues in the future, right? So many different areas that we can link this into just within the initial 2 pages. So this brings to an end of the first section of the pre-scene analysis. Now, if you are interested in continuing to view or continuing to see the entire video analysis, well, we have made it possible. The entire video analysis covering all the pages are available, right? So you can check out our website and check for the MCS pre-scene video analysis. And apart from that, we also offer a strategic analysis document, and we have 5 mock exams with solutions, right? So these are 5 mock exams directly relevant to this company or tailor-made to Norton by our experienced panel of tutors. So you have the option of either purchasing these mock exams along with the solutions and practicing them in our simulated exam scenario, exam platform rather, or the other option is to obtain these and also request for feedback. Our experienced tutors will give you feedback for the answers that you have provided, so that will be a marked answer, so you will be able to understand where you stand, right? And these mock exams are similar to the exam standard that you can expect. So this will be a very good practice. So with my experience, let me remind you that the key to pass this exam would be, a proper understanding of the areas of the syllabus. Right now, that would be a crucial aspect for especially gateway students. And the other aspect, or the other point, or the secret rather, to pass this exam would be practicing mock exams under exam conditions. Right? So we can help you out with your entire study program, because we have packages that can be customized to your requirement. So you can go to our website and check out information about our products, and also we have blog posts that cover different areas of the 3 subjects, and of course the tree scene. You can also join our Facebook group where we'll be constantly updating, and also we have a WhatsApp group where we offer free study support, right? So you have students all over the world in that, and it's basically a forum to share ideas and discuss different areas. And I myself am a part of the group along with the other team of tutors of Study CIMA. So you can request to join that group, and the link for all of this is given below the video, right? So you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please do your friends a favor and please share this video with them on social media, especially for people who are planning to face the exam in February 2018. So with that said, I wish you all the very best in your exams. Thank you.